Hello, everybody. It's the Deephaven community team back with another demo for February week 2. Let's get started. All right, so first up, we got Stan. He's going to show us a benchmarking demo. So take it away, Stan.
Okay, this is just a quick high-level overview of some of the benchmarking that we've been doing at Deephaven. And the benchmark project, you can see on your screen the URL for the GitHub project. It's public. I refer you to the README for most of the details. I'm not really going to hit them in this. But essentially, the benchmarking project is an effort to measure Deephaven query operations at scale. And to do that, you have to generate data. It works in JUnit. So any IDE that you would have, you should be able to do this in if you've got a plugin for running JUnit. And first, you're typically going to generate data, as you see on the screen, and then you create a test, and the test looks a lot like, or exactly like the UI, what you would put in the UI, except for possibly properties. So you're going to run these queries in your IDE, or if you compile your tests into a test jar, you can run them from the command line, like the benchmarking nightly server does. And you can also run them local or remote. So there's a property file that you can use, and normally you're going to have like Deephaven and the Red Panda Docker installs running locally. You run against those, and let's say that you want to run it at a greater scale than your local dev box can handle. You can change a property in the property file to point it to whatever. This is localhost here, but you can change that to point to your provision system and run it that way. Also, you can change the scale. So here I've got it set at 10 million. You could change that to whatever you want as long as it fits into the resources of what's configured for Deephaven. The other thing to note is that we have got nightly and I'm calling them release builds now. That should probably be changed to on-demand builds. So we have a provision server that every night is going to run the latest build of the product and benchmark against it and generate benchmark history into gcloud. So we have a gcloud bucket, and we have nightly and release right now in there. And so you're going to see a bunch of run numbers that are actually time-based, and you can pull those results up, and you will see something like this. And right now we've got a bunch of single operation buys and that run in the query engine, and these are running at 10 million records. And you have a test rate. This is the main interesting part, is that you have a processing rate. So it's how many records are being processed over time for static from reading from Parquet versus reading through a simulated ticking table release mechanism. And so if you want more details for that, the README will be updated, and that's it.
Very cool. Next up, we have Devin. He's going to show us sharing Deephaven with coworkers. Devin, take it away.
Yeah, I am going to
let me unshare here.
Share my screen here in a second, but I just wanted to take a second and just propose something I want to do, or something some of you might want to do. So we're all used to working, with Deephaven queries locally. We've got our local IDE. We've also got a demo system that's provisioned in the cloud that we can go to. But typically, let's say I wanted to share something quick with Binder or Corey.
You're sharing your screen there, Devin?
I don't mean to share my screen yet.
Oh, okay.
I will shortly. I think my video is turned on.
I'm not seeing your video.
This is one of the problems with having a remote rural internet. But anyways, hopefully you can hear me. And as soon as I share my screen, hopefully you'll be able to see it. But say I want to share some Deephaven queries with my coworker, and maybe I've got a special setup on my machine that has data that's not in the cloud. But a traditional workflow for sharing data with a colleague, might involve some sort of cloud machine that both people need to be able to access, whether you auto provision it and then tear it down based on the life cycle. Maybe you're on a server client VPN, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say I wanted to share a local process with a coworker, something that I have on my machine. Traditionally, what you're going to do to be able to make that happen is you're going to obviously have to start your local process. Then you're going to have to give your colleague your public IP address, if you even have a public IP address. And I actually don't have a public IP address because I'm double netted behind a rural wireless internet, and maybe that's why you can't see my video right now. Like in my case, I'd have to set up a reverse proxy to a public cloud service if I wanted somebody to connect directly to my box. And then, of course, you'd have to set up port forwarding on your router to your machine. So now, once you've got all that set up, you can go http://public IP address and port. And hopefully you've got it locked down somehow, so not everybody on the internet can get to it. But that's how you'd have to initially get it. So there's a lot of potential setup behind it. But let's say now you want a domain name. So now you have to register a domain name. Now you have to add a DNS entry, and hopefully you have a static IP. Oh wait, you're on a laptop and your IP changes, or your ISP is giving you different IP addresses. Now you have to set up dynamic DNS, and you have to have some sort of DNS provider API. And now you want TLS? Okay, so you have to do all the above. Now you use Let's Encrypt. Maybe you need to expose port 80 on your firewall, or maybe you have some more APIs to your DNS provider. But this long-winded, theoretical response is basically the takeaway is networking is hard. And so I want to share a quick solution that I think organizations might find useful, or users might find useful, called tailscale. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen finally here.
Yep, we
So what I've set up,
see it.
can you see it now, Bender?
Yep.
Perfect. So tailscale is a mesh VPN network that is built on WireGuard. And WireGuard's a really cool technology, and I'm not going to get too much into it. But essentially, I have got the Deephaven organization set up for tailscale. I have got tailscale mapped in to a Docker Compose file. And then I've got a little bit of reverse proxy setup here. And then a Deephaven server image. It has a little bit of fixes for reasons I'll talk about in a minute. And then a little bit of setup here saying, here's my domain name, and this is something that tailscale has automatically provisioned for me. And they automatically do Let's Encrypt certificates for me. So I don't have to expose anything on my firewall, but I can go ahead and run this real quick. HD. And after I start this, I should be able to go to my host name on the tailscale network and get to my service. So let's go ahead and reload this page. Boom. So this is not too exciting because it's still on my local network. And yeah, I can do my tables, I can do normal stuff. It is nice though, because I do have a certificate that is signed by Let's Encrypt, and I didn't have to do anything special. I don't have to use any non-standard ports. The one new part here is that I am prefixing some of the paths and reverse proxying the web ID behind this path. And there's a little bit of setup that you have to do here. You might ask, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this path prefixing? And the answer is then it makes it really, really easy to simply spin up another service. So here's my foo service, and I will go ahead and spin up a bar service now. Let's go ahead and save this and redo this up command. And now I'm provisioning a new Deephaven server called bar. And we'll go here and we'll go bar. So there we go. And just to prove that these are different instances, I'll say hi from bar. And then I will go back to foo. And so just to reiterate here, I haven't opened up anything on my firewall. I've got this running, and what I'm going to do now is actually let me start up one more service here just to show we can have 3 of them. And I'm going to throw it over to Corey to demonstrate that he can get access to these services. And I haven't had to do anything special with my firewall. We've just had to install the tailscale client and log in with our Deephaven username.
Take it away, Corey.
Great. Hi. So I'm going to share a window of mine, and let's see if that works. I got Devin's URLs preloaded into this doc for easy access. And by the way, I'm on the East Coast, so I'm like, on the other side of the country from Devin. And also, by the way, tailscale took me literally 2 minutes to install. It was the most painless install I've ever done, both in Windows and Linux. It was just really fast. So are you seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay. And so there's this, I believe there's the hi from foo. That's the table Devin just created. And I assume that I full control here. I don't want me to do this, but a equals setup. It's just I have full access to this IDE. Did you, Devin? What did you want me to do?
Yeah, I mean, you could go to the bar one, or I spun up a Baz one, and so
Okay.
using that same domain name and just a different path prefix, you should be able to access my services. And again, the loading speed isn't very fast right now because of my particular internet setup, but you do see that these are separate workers served under the same domain.
And here's this print statement you had in there from before. Uh-oh.
There's no table T. I think we probably opened this URL earlier. But.
Okay. And do you want me to open
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea is that it's really easy to spin up these prefix paths, so you could spin up 100 of them if you wanted to, but otherwise it's more about sharing with coworkers, I think, and how easy it is. So
Baz is being a little pokey. Oh, there it goes.
Cool.
Very cool.
All right. Well, next up, I think we've got Colin. He's going to show us a demo with some authentication providers that we're working on for the Deephaven core. So, Colin, take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to try and share as soon as I've got it from Corey. All right, looks like that's working.
Yep.
So I'm going to run this entirely from inside the browser just to demonstrate this. So this is the server startup saying, hey, everything's up and running and working. We've got some new logging here. So just to dovetail a little bit, if you do happen to be sharing on a VPN with your very small team, you're probably perfectly happy with anyone logging in and doing whatever they want. But as your team grows a little bit, or as you happen to be working in a coffee shop on whatever project you're on, you may not want your information exposed to everyone who happens to be on the same network or VPNs as you. So turning anonymous authentication off has been a priority of ours, getting ourselves to be in a position where we can do that. And now, as of future version here, we will have a warning saying, hey, anonymous authentication is turned on. You may want to turn that off. And now we will have a few other options available. The easiest one will be having a pre-shared key. That way, just like your Wi-Fi password at home, when someone comes to your house, if you trust them, you can give them the password and then they can connect. And everyone can do whatever they want on the network. We also have basic authentication where username and password can be typed in. And we have a very simple example of this using a Postgres database to store usernames and passwords. And then I also have a Keycloak server to allow some single sign-on, just in case you have more than a few services and want to coordinate who can log into any of them and avoid even typing any passwords at all. So this doesn't work from the web UI just yet, but we do have some simple HTML samples that are something like 4 or 5 lines of JavaScript each to show how to connect to these, plus a little bit of validation and logging to show how they work. So this is what a hypothetical client, whether it's JavaScript or C++ or whatever it is, might be able to query the server and say, hey, how am I allowed to connect? And what other properties should I know in order to get this done properly? So to use a username and password, for example, there's a little bit of text on each one of these that you can read if you run it yourself. And this one will authenticate to a server with the username admin and a password. And if I click go, it's going to say, yes, it supports the handler, and yes, we were successful. And if I change the password to something else, we will get an error as expected. MTLS, so this particular server happens to be using SSL, though it's a self-signed certificate, so we have an error showing up here. And my browser also has a certificate assigned to it, allowing me to indicate who I am just by connecting with this. And this is often helpful for services to connect to each other. For example, one worker might query another worker, or some batch service might query a Deephaven instance and use a certificate instead of a password or something. And to do this, we don't have to type anything at all. We just have to install the certificate. And as soon as we arrive, yep, the server supports it. And yes, we automatically authenticate. And then I'm going to skip this one for the moment. Pre-shared key requires some password that you already know. We saw this as it scrolled by. It said the pre-shared key is ASDF. It will automatically pick a random one if you don't specify one. But the random one's a little bit longer, and I didn't want to risk the fact that I wouldn't be able to type for a demo, because that's what happens when I share my screen. So instead, I just picked something simple that I couldn't possibly screw up. And sure enough, we can connect, and the server confirms, yep, that's how you're allowed to connect. The last one is using OpenID Connect with Keycloak. So this is going to delegate how we connect to another service. Now, any kind of single sign-on requires a little more work to finish connecting. We have to redirect the user over to another service. It's going to say, yes, we're connected. We're about to redirect. So now I'm on a different server, also on my own computer here, but it could easily be running somewhere else. And I can log in as admin or as user because I have this configured to support that. We could also hook this up to Google Authentication or GitHub or any other, sorry about that, that's very loud. Any other existing single sign-on that Keycloak can in turn connect to and delegate to. And then once I come back here, I have to trigger this again by clicking go, because that's how the example works, to make sure you can debug it properly. And then it connects properly and says, yep, everything was successful. If you wait a minute or two, it's going to, when you try to log in, it's going to say, oh, I'm sorry, something didn't work properly. And then it will redirect, but the redirect is automatic. It will bring you right back to this page again and show that, yes, you are still connected. Everything is working properly. It's just part of how Keycloak doesn't immediately let you log in to a web page you visited once, unless the user has actually indicated that, yes, this should work properly. So these are all, each one of these is maybe a dozen lines of Java to describe how to do this, but can obviously be customized for any installation. And then the JavaScript itself is very simple too. This is one of the more complicated ones because we're using Keycloak's own JavaScript to set this up. But even for this, it just requires us saying, hey, here's how you connect to Keycloak. Here's how we're going to initialize it. And then once we have successfully connected to the server, we check if we're already authenticated, in which case we log into Deephaven itself. Otherwise, I've got a deliberate slowdown here. That way you can read the logs as they happen. Otherwise, we just call keycloak.login, which redirects us to the Keycloak server.
Cool. And that'll eventually come to the UI with login plugins or authentication plugins, where we'll be able to provide your own plugin to do one of these methods and show the UI for it.
All right. Not this month, but next month for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all we've got for this week. So we'll see you next week. Cheers.